Hello YouTube. Back in 2021, archaeologists in Crimea had the peak of their excavation season. Crimea is a peninsula in the Black Sea claimed by both Ukraine and Russia, but under the Russian control presently. News about interesting finds began to appear with regularity that pleases the souls of those who love antiquity. Discovered there was a god of silence, Aphrodite with a mirror, but there was another discovery. Buried deformed skulls were found at the ancient necropolis of Kiz Aul, according to Oleg Markov, Director of Development of the Archaeology Foundation. The scientists said this: in the ancient cemetery, the burial of the first centuries of our era, meaning common era, has been preserved, which the illegal archaeologists or grave robbers did not reach. They were not able to steal from there. There were 5 skeletons in that grave, on top of the bones of a woman on whose chest were the remains of a child, and already 3 more bones under her. All those buried had deformed skull bones during their lifetime, according to Markov. These are the so-called elongated skulls, traditional for the Sarmatian culture. According to one of the currently existing hypotheses, this head shape was formed by tight bandaging and was an indicator of the social status of its owner. In addition to the bones, a ceramic saucer, an iron knife, and a copper coin were also found in the burial, which, after cleaning, would tell the exact date of that burial. Archaeology is a serious science. Everything discovered would be carefully studied. But individual users of the social media have their own hypothesis, which does not exclude traces of extraterrestrial civilizations. So there was a concise comment: they are aliens, 5 aliens. It remains to be recalled that the truth is always somewhere nearby, and skulls of this shape have been found on the peninsula before. 50 kilometers from Kerch, city of Kerch, and the ancient necropolis of Kiz Aul, Yakovenkovo village. Well, the volunteers of the Archaeology Foundation, they discovered interesting finds. So, for example, during the 3 weeks of operation in the field camps, the burial of a baby of the 2nd century Common Era was found. Its uniqueness lies in the fact that the skull of the buried person was severely deformed according to the barbaric tradition. The expedition participants immediately dubbed this burial site the grave of an alien, according to Oleg Markov. An accompanying material was found next to the skeleton, consisting of a molded vessel, small beads of paste glass, and a copper alloy bracelet worn on the right hand. The burial itself was carried out in a dirt grave without tile floor. The buried person lay with his head to the east. According to the anthropologist, it was a boy, and at the time of his death he was no more than 1.5 years old. This is indicated by a fontanelle that is not overgrown on the skull. Accordingly, his head was deformed almost immediately after birth. In the layer where the alien, so to say, was discovered, there are burials from the 1st century before Common Era to the 3rd century Common Era. Monumental stone crypts belong to the same period, which are considered the tombs of the Sarmatian military nobility of the Bosporan kingdom. Just 3 meters from this burial site, our volunteers were clearing one of the crypts, according to Markov. deformation of the skulls is most often found in Sarmatians, especially late ones, and this is one of the signs of their identification. It is known that the first finds of artificially deformed skulls were made by the discoverer of the Bosporan archaeology, or the founder of that archaeology, Paul Dubrax, in 1826, in the necropolises of Bosporus of Cimmeria in the Kerch region. According to experts, cranial deformity was most likely carried out to indicate belonging to a group or to demonstrate social status. Of course, for supporters of the paleocontact or ancient alien hypothesis, such skulls are irrefutable evidence of contact with aliens. According to some researchers, such changes in the shape of the skull led to a change in human character, for example, to increased aggressiveness. So the Sarmatians, whose skull deformity was very common, were paramilitary people and were characterized by increased aggression. According to experts, it is quite possible that the boy who was buried at the Kiz Aul necropolis was destined to become a warrior, an equestrian cataphract, or a very heavily armored horseman, a defender of the Bosporan state in the future. Elongated skulls are a very interesting global phenomenon. All over the planet, researchers are discovering traces of these mysterious artifacts, the nature of which allegedly defies any explanation. Many enthusiasts eagerly call the elongated skulls evidence of the existence of forbidden archaeology, and some of them even believe that they are proof that the real history of mankind is actually being hidden from mankind. But who, and most importantly, why is hiding the truth from us? Why are bizarre and unusual deformities of the skull ignored by scientists? And why do they persistently refuse to seek the truth? Why doesn't anyone want to know why ancient cultures around the world practice the procedure by which they artificially created elongated skulls in humans? And in general, did they come up with this idea on their own, or was there some kind of external influence in those ancient people? Or maybe thousands of years ago, some advanced human race unknown to science inhabited our planet? Or did the ancient people practice skull deformation because they saw a race of advanced creatures that originally had elongated skulls and strange bodies? There are actually a lot of questions. It is characteristic that the phenomenon of elongated skulls is not an isolated case. After all, elongated skulls are found in all corners of the earth. Among the most interesting examples of elongated skulls are the so-called skulls of the Paracas culture. They were discovered in the province of Pisco, Peru, almost 100 years ago. Once upon a time, those Inca Empire, if they flourished in these places, it is believed that these skulls are about 3,000 years old. And the DNA tests allegedly showed that the elongated skulls of the Paracas culture belong to a completely unknown human species. Some scientists claim that the DNA extracted from skulls for research has strange mutations. Such changes are never found in humans. They have also never been discovered in primates or other animals. Researchers believe that the elongated skulls belong to a completely unknown human species. And this species is very far from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, and it does not fit into the generally accepted evolutionary tree. Most likely, these creatures could not even interbreed with humans. There were a few of them, and this led to their degeneration. This explains the many skulls of children that have been discovered. They were simply not viable. The elongated skulls of the Paracas culture have other strange features. The researchers concluded that the average volume of the skulls is 25% larger than that of the average modern human. And besides, they are 60% heavier than ordinary human skulls. But that's not all. The human skull has two parietal bones, but the elongated skulls of the Paracas culture have only one. That is, it is not a modification of the human skull. So who was it? Aliens? Maybe they visited our planet once upon a time, and ancient people observed them, and then artificially modified their heads, imitating the gods or deities from heaven. And the skulls of the Paracas culture, just the remains of aliens, like a cemetery. What if for some reason their ship or vessel broke down and they couldn't fly home? Or did their world die maybe in a fire of a nuclear war? Obviously, in order to find out the whole truth about the phenomenon of elongated skulls, we need to get out of our comfort zone, so to say, and look at science, history, and the origin of mankind from a completely different point of view, independent of our dogmas and established ideas. Only then we will understand the history and life of the ancient cultures that inhabited our planet thousands of years ago. But now, let's go to the ever-mysterious Urals in Russia. The ancient Ural fortress Arkaim, located in the Chelyabinsk region, is often called the Russian Stonehenge. In addition to streets and buildings, scientists have found remnants of a water system, metallurgic furnaces, and mines. Arkaim is not only a settlement, but it is also a temple and an astronomical observatory. It was round, spherical in shape, and was 160 meters in diameter. It was surrounded by a ditch that was filled with water. An outside wall was very massive. The height was 5.5 meters and the width 5 meters. The wall had 4 gates. The largest gate was Southwest Gate. All the buildings were shaped in half rounds and were connected to the outside wall. Each building had exit to the main street in the city. But enough about Arkaim. You see, 3 kilometers from the Arkaim Nature Reserve in the Kizilsky district of the Chelyabinsk region, scientists have discovered a unique burial site. The discovery was made by an archaeological expedition which included scientists from the Chelyabinsk State University, employees of the Arkaim Nature Reserve, and students from the Chelyabinsk State University, from the Department of History. Excavations were carried out on the territory of the burial ground, discovered back in the 1990s, but remained untouched until 2015. The burial ground consisted of 15 mounds with an unusual horseshoe shape and presumably dated back to the 2nd to 3rd centuries Common Era, said Maria Makurova, head of the Museum of the Arkaim Reserve. The expedition has excavated the first of the 3 mounds that are planned to be explored that year. In it, they found a burial site containing a skeleton with a pronounced deformity of the skull. In the upper part, it had a distinct elongated shape. Most likely, it was the skeleton of a woman. It would be possible to say exactly who is buried in the burial ground, a woman or a man, only after an anthropological examination. And I believed a few years later it was confirmed that it was a female. Most likely, archaeologists have discovered the grave of a noble woman from the tribe of the late Sarmatians, a nomadic people who inhabited the territories of southern Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. The position in which the skeleton was found suggests that before the funeral, the body was tightly wrapped in some kind of cloth or shroud, so that the arms were tightly pressed against the body and the legs were brought together. The skeleton lied on its back with its head facing north. This method of burial is typical for many nomadic tribes inhabiting the Eurasian steppes or savannas, plains, including the late Sarmatians who roamed the South Ural steppes in the 2nd to 4th centuries Common Era. The greatest interest in the find is the artificial deformation of the skull. Why was it necessary to give the nomad's head an elongated shape? As the archaeological finds of the last 2 centuries have shown, the practice of prolonged mechanical action on the growing head of children in order to deform it was widespread among the many people who were developed completely independently of each other. The first artificially deformed skulls were found in Peru at the very beginning of the 19th century, then in 1820 in Austria, according to archaeologist Mikhail Pinegov. Further archaeological research has shown that elongated skulls are found almost everywhere. They're found in the graves of ancient Egyptians, in North Africa, in the graves of the Aztecs, Incas, and other Indian tribes of Mesoamerica and South America, in the necropolises of Central Asia and Khwarezm, in burials in the territories belonging to Malta, Iran, Syria, Cyprus, Crete, France, Norway, and many other countries. Relatively recently, they were also found in graves located in Siberia. In Russia, scientists exclude the possibility that the skulls found by archaeologists could have acquired a strange elongated shape due to the peculiarities of infant care in ancient times or injuries suffered. Artificial deformities of the head can be intentional and unintentional, explained anthropologist Boris Salzman. For example, if a baby is tightly swaddled and put in a cradle for a long time in one position, then his or her skull will deform in the occipital part. Under the influence of its own gravity, it will become flattened. However, it is extremely difficult to imagine then what an unintended effect on the bones of the head should be so that they acquire an even elongated shape. Accordingly, this goal was achieved consciously. Anthropologists have found that special wooden pads and ropes were used to deform the bones of the skull. They tightened the children's heads in the area of the temples. In some burials in South America, even special children's beds were found in which small children were fixed so that they could not take off all these devices that caused unpleasant sensations. Later, they were replaced with this gentler technology, strips of fabrics. So in the African tribe of Mangbetu, parents still tightly swaddle children's heads with bandages, after which the bones of the skull acquire an elongated shape. Artificially limiting the growth possibilities of the skull, a natural curvature of the head is still being achieved by some tribes of the Congo, Sudan, and the New Hebrides Islands in the western Pacific Ocean. With the Sarmatians, circular deformations of the head shape is first found in the graves of the early period. The fact that so-called eggheads were popular on the eastern shore of the Black Sea was reported by the ancient Greek physician Hippocrates in the 5th century before Common Era. He talked about a certain ethnic group of macrocephalians whose upstretched heads were a sign of belonging to the elite. Macrocephals considered those who have the longest heads to be the noblest. Their custom is as follows. As soon as the child is born, and while his or her head is still tender and flexible, they shape it and make it grow in length, surrounding it with a bandage and using appropriate means so that its round spherical shape can be changed and increased in length. References to macrocephals are found in the writings of Aristotle, Strabo, and Pliny. Macrocephaly is the condition in which the head circumference of an infant is above 2 standard deviations, which is above the 97th percentile. In the 1st century before Common Era to 1st century Common Era, skeletons with upstretched skull are found in 35% of Sarmatian burials. Then this tradition became more popular, and in the 2nd through 4th centuries Common Era, this head shape was found in 88% of graves. The widespread of this custom among the nomadic tribes living in the south of Russia made it one of the distinctive features of the late Sarmatians. There is information about the custom of deformation from ancient authors. Thus, Chinese sources know that the custom of deforming the head with the help of planks existed in the Middle Ages in East Turkestan. Hippocrates reports that people who lived in the Azov steppes and Transcaspia made artificial deformation and were called Sarmatians. Strabo noted that the tribes of Sigenes, who lived near the Caspian Sea, practiced artificial deformation of the head. According to several Russian researchers, it was the Sarmatian tribes who borrowed this custom from the nomadic tribes of the Central Asia and brought it from the Volga steppes to Europe, retreating westward under the onslaught of the Huns. So why, over the centuries, have people considered it necessary to change the shape of their children's heads? The first explanation is the simplest. They probably thought elongated skulls were more beautiful. For the same reason, the Japanese bandaged the girls' feet tightly so that they would remain tiny, and the Thai Padaung tribe stretched their necks, putting on more and more rings. However, such a completely illogical explanation raises another question. Why suddenly many people, completely independently of each other, came to the conclusion that an elongated skull is much more beautiful than usual? According to Boris Salzman, an abnormally long neck, small foot, or thin waist can form naturally and occur often enough to become a role model. Everything depends on the standard of beauty in a particular society. But the elongated shape of the skull is an extremely rare anomaly. It is difficult to suggest that in several isolated societies it was suddenly considered beautiful without external reason. Why has no one tried to achieve, let's say, a flattened or square head shape, although such anomalies occur periodically? For many members of society who want elongated skulls, such a head shape had to be a characteristic feature of an ideal or supreme being, especially when you consider that for the sake of such deformation, you had to make serious sacrifices. The pressure on the bones of the skull contributes to the development of migraines. Is fraught with mental and physical abnormalities. It was impossible not to notice the harmful effects of using the practice of deformation for thousands of years. It took good reasons to ignore them. It is impossible to assume that the fashion for egg-headedness spontaneously or by chance arose in one of the ancient societies and then spread among the peoples separated by gigantic distances and oceans. Therefore, here scientists have to leave the solid ground of science and move into the shaky, according to some, neuroscientific fields. One of the explanations why many ancient peoples separated by spatial and temporal boundaries needed to change the natural shape of the skull is offered by the supporters of the theory of paleocontact, ancient aliens theory. Says Mikhail Penyagov. In their opinion, the alien creatures had visited the Earth at various periods in its history, and they had skulls of exactly this elongated shape. The terrestrial people who perceived them as gods sought to become like them by changing their appearance. A common explanation is that in this way, Earthlings became similar to the gods that most ancient peoples, for example, the Maya Indians, ancient Egyptians, Semitic tribes of the Middle East, depicted in complex elongated headdresses or with elongated skulls. But why did they imagine the gods to be like this? There's another serious argument against the theory of head deformity to demonstrate status. Why then, for example, do Sarmatians have an elongated skull shape found in more than 80% of burials of the late period? There could not have been such a number of priests and rulers, according to Mikhail Penyagov, which means that another common hypothesis sounds more convincing, that the elongated shape of the head had an informative function and allowed you to distinguish your own from others. Members of many societies are characterized by the desire to identify their belonging to them, irreversibly changing their appearance. However, it is much easier to do this with the help of collar or scar tattoos, by changing the shape of ears, nose, or other ethnic self-inflicted injuries. Changing the shape of the skull in children is too difficult and dangerous. Moreover, studies of Sarmatian graves have shown that the deformed skulls found in them in the same way belong to different anthropological types. That is, the special shape of the head could not indicate belonging to a particular tribe, which contradicts the original assumption. Perhaps it testified to belonging to a certain union of tribes. However, the theory of marking by deforming the skull of belonging to a certain union of tribes again does not explain why this practice has become widespread in almost all territories of the earth, according to Mikhail Penyagov. Therefore, he thinks the question of the causes of artificial deformation of the head shape should be considered open. In his opinion, this is one of the most intriguing questions of historical anthropology. Interestingly, the fashion for an elongated skull has not disappeared without a trace. It left many traces in a wide variety of cultures, including Russian. The kokoshnik is a traditional Russian headdress worn by women and girls to accompany the sarafan. The kokoshnik tradition has existed since the 10th century in the ancient Russian city of Veliki Novgorod. It spread primarily in the northern regions of Russia and was very popular from the 16th to 19th century. It is still to this day an important feature of the Russian dance ensembles and folk culture, and inspired the kokoshnik style of architecture. Some researchers explain the appearance of the Russian kokoshnik by the attempt of Slavic tribes to imitate the shape of the heads of the conquerors, nomadic Sarmatians, according to the historian Ivan Silandlev. And it is not by chance that the kokoshniks have become a detail of a woman's costume or dress. According to the testimony of ancient Greek historian Herodotus, women in Sarmatian tribes had a higher social status than with other ancient people. They took an active part in public life and sacred rituals, even fought on an equal basis with men. Herodotus explained this by saying that the Sarmatians descended from the marriages of the Scythians and the legendary Amazons. And you can see this in my video about the Amazons, which I made some years ago, and I think it's one of the most interesting, because you're finding out not just that the Amazons existed in the Greek imagination, but much more. Modern historians see the explanations for the high status of women among the Sarmatians in the traces of matriarchy. Moreover, many researchers suggest that initially the deformation of skulls was practiced exclusively among Sarmatian women. The hefts of men were quite ordinary in shape, and the kokoshnik as an accessory of a woman's costume has preserved the memory of this feature. What I want to do in one of my future videos is to talk about ancient medicine practices, to see some input in today's information that I gave you. And of course, I'll keep my eyes open, so to say, and ears open to the new discoveries about this strange custom of elongated skulls throughout the planet. Archaeology is making great strides, and I'll tell you about this. If you like my research, please support me through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please like my videos and tell others about my channel. Thank you.